Well, David Del Conte is a campaign leader for Stop Tigray Famine for Refugee International. He has also worked in the United Nations and for NGOs in multiple roles, including as Deputy Country Director in Ethiopia for the UN Office for the Coordination of Humanitarian Affairs. Joins me now via Skype from New York. Even before the expulsion or the attempted expulsion of these UN humanitarian workers, access to Tigray and the delivery of life-saving aid was heavily restricted, wasn't it? How much food and medicine has been able to reach the region?
Well, thank you for having me. Since the blockade came into effect on 26 June, less than 10% of the necessary supplies have reached the region. Aid agencies have since exhausted nearly all of the supplies that were pre-positioned in the warehouses in Mekelle, leaving the vast majority of the operation suspended until more supplies are allowed in. For the civilian population, which is mainly comprised of women, children, and the elderly, as you can imagine, seeing from recent reports, the situation is a slow and painful march towards starvation.
Can you tell us more about the situation there, how devastating it is for families? We have these incredible figures, millions of people in need of food aid, hundreds of thousands facing famine, families struggling to put food on the table. What contact have you had with people inside Tigray about how this is affecting their lives?
Well, since the blockade came into effect, communications to Tigray, into and out of Tigray, have been cut. So it's very difficult to hear from Tigrayans themselves or to speak with them as to what's happening to them and their family. That's one of the aspects of the blockade. Through my contacts and those of Refugees International, we know the situation is becoming increasingly dire. The absence of food aid, nutrition supplies, medical supplies, and fuel to truck water means that the situation every day gets worse. The absence of banking facilities means that Tigrayans can't access their savings in banks to be able to buy or buy supplies for their families. The absence of commerce means that they can't share or purchase items in the market. So these dynamics make for a particularly serious situation that is only growing worse by the day.
And if it doesn't change soon, we're talking about how serious could the loss of life be? What sort of scale are we talking about?
The interim Tigrayan authorities were speaking about famine-related deaths months ago. The information that produced the result of 350,000 people in famine conditions on the 4th of June for the United Nations, and the result of an absence of food aid, an absence of medical supplies, and an absence of support can only produce a far worse situation today. The United States noted that 900,000 at least were facing famine conditions at the end of June. But the blackout creates a context where we don't have accurate numbers to be able to measure off these things in real time.
Beyond the work of the United Nations, how have aid agencies and other NGOs been restricted or prevented from reaching the region? How is the government obstructing their work?
Well, the bureaucratic requirements to work in Ethiopia are particularly difficult for NGOs and for the UN agencies. There's a lot of bureaucratic obstacles to being able to get into the country, visas and the like. To be able to get up country did improve through interventions earlier this year, but there's still very, very restricted road access and very limited amounts of air travel. For aid agencies, there's a bit of a Damocles sword above their heads. To speak out risks their operation, such as MSF or NRC. To not speak out means that they have to accept the conditions that are occurring on the ground, which is which is brutal. And I understand completely why operational agencies have maintained a certain amount of distance from advocacy efforts. That being said, the situation in Ethiopia is growing more dire by the day, and we do need to have people such as people and organizations such as Refugees International speaking out to draw attention to the famine and to the unnecessary amount of death that is occurring as a result of it.
But of course, we speak about the need for there to be life-saving supplies into the Tigray region, food, fuel, medicine. But how significant is the communications blackout if you don't have information about what is happening to communities in Tigray? I mean, are aid agencies and the United Nations able to draw up contingency plans to be able to prepare for what could be a crisis on a massive scale?
Absolutely. There's an ability to draw up crisis plans and response plans, but without relief assistance, they're just plans.
David Del Conte, thank you. Thank you for joining us there from Refugee International, shedding a bit more light on the situation in the northern region of Tigray. Thank you.